Hello, hello, hello. This is Lisa Copeland, and I am so excited. I've got a very special guest today on my Real Estate Her Way podcast, Tanya Kerr from Keller Williams in Georgetown. Not only is she a colleague of mine, somebody I do a lot of business with, but she's a friend and she's an absolute subject matter expert when it comes to real estate. And the Real Estate Her Way podcast is really about we're solving one problem. We know that there's a $1 million wealth gap between listen to me, men and women, and we want to solve for that. So I have put together a group of experts, absolute authorities, top producing agents and affiliates, attorneys, all kinds of people. And I'm coming to them, they're all women, to hear what they have to say, because we want to solve the wealth gap problem for my audience and for all women in the world. Tanya, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, I could not do something like this without having you.
Well, thank you. I love having another woman who is very like-minded and surrounding ourselves with women who are like-minded and making sure that women are achieving financial freedom too.
Okay, so take us back. So you're top producing agent with Keller Williams in Georgetown, Texas, but you were not born there. You didn't just start there. Tell me what you did prior to getting into real estate, because I think it's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So a short synopsis of my life is I grew up pretty poor. So yeah. So we were not financially secure by any means, and depending on what time of my life, sometimes we're worse than others. And so my childhood was not one where we had a lot of money or means. And so my mom and my father were married, and that was a very tumultuous relationship. And I've told you the story, and I'm happy to share it now. But there was a pivotal moment that changed my way of thinking about finances that I love to share with women, because it was so pivotal in how I treat money and my belief system around it. So my parents, when I was in about fifth grade, were going through divorce, and it was extremely, extremely volatile. The marriage had been very volatile and abusive, and it was bad. And so my mom and I were cooking dinner. And as we were cooking dinner, I looked over at her and I just said, "What took you so long?" Because they had been married 15 years. And I said, "What took you so long?" And she looked back at me and she knew exactly what I meant. And there was no context. We were not having a conversation. And she said, "Baby, when somebody controls your money, they also control you."
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah. And that in fifth grade, like, it did something to me where I just remember thinking, money, there is a lot of power with money, if we're being completely honest, but that's not the way I have a relationship with money. For me, money equals freedom of choice. And what I recognized in that moment was that my mom did not have the freedom of choice to leave a relationship that she knew she needed to leave for herself and her kids, because she did not have the money. And those were
Chills. I got chills when you said that women are tied to relationships that are potentially not good for them because they don't have control of the money.
and
Wow.
future generations
Are writing this down and listening to this. It's so powerful.
And future generations too, right? If a woman is stuck in a relationship or a situation, whatever it be, that is not healthy for her and is toxic for the kids now live with that, and they can overcome it. Absolutely. I believe that we are all, in every crisis is an opportunity as well. And but that belief system for me has really empowered me to try to live in a way where I can make decisions based on what I desire and what's best for me and my family, rather than financially. So long story short, my mom ended up getting remarried, and that was a wonderful marriage for her. And during that time, they had two. My brother and sister, my half brother and sister, are twins, so they had kids. And I went to college, and when I went to college, I was actually a biology major, and although I did terrible in chemistry, like that was never, I could not. But anyhow, so I was a biology major. My mom ended up coming down with very, very severe stage 4 breast cancer. And so at that time, like I said, I was in school, and then unfortunately it spread to her lungs. And so the doctors gave her 2 weeks to live. It was a very, like, it just went from she was in remission to all of a sudden she had 2 weeks to live. And so I went to my professors and I told my professors, I said, hey, listen, I'm going home and I'm taking care of my mom. And so you can either let me work remotely, let me do my work remotely, or I'm going to drop the class. And it was about half and half. And so I went home and I took care of my mom. She ended up living about 2 months. And that was a really, really hard time. And my brother and sister had just turned 6 when she passed.
God.
Yeah. So I was 20, my brother and sister were 6. And so I went, it was their very first day in first grade. I mean, like a month and a half after my mom passed. And so I took them for their first day of first grade, and I dropped my sister off, and she's very much like me. She bebopped in her room. She was fine. But I took my little brother, and he went and he sat in the corner in the beanbag, and his teacher never acknowledged him. Just, he was sitting there and he was crying in the corner. This is an emotional thing for me. And so I just remember seeing him, and I thought, never in my life do I want to see another kid suffer like this. I just can't. I can't do it. And so then another pivotal moment for me. And so I went back, after I got them on their feet, I went back to school and I dropped, I was no longer a biology major, and I went into elementary education. And so that's how the transition into education began. So I had to catch up real quickly because I had lost some time. And I ended up graduating and becoming a teacher. I was a first grade teacher first. After my very first year of teaching, I thought, my job isn't done. I want to become an administrator so I can impact change. So I went back for my master's degree as I was teaching. So I taught first grade, I taught fourth grade, got my master's degree. And then I moved back. I was in Houston at the time, and I moved back to the Austin area. And so that's how the transition back to here began. And then I was a teacher for a while, then an instructional coach, which essentially you help teachers perform their jobs. And then I became an assistant principal. Now, when I was in education, there was a girl that stood up and she was talking. I remember this vividly because it talks about the power of planting a seed. And so she stood up and she was talking about owning her own home as a teacher. And I remember thinking in my head, yeah, that's because your parents helped you buy it. And that is not the life I live. Right? Like, I was on my own. I was always on my own.
Were you a homeowner? Or no, not yet?
Say that again.
Were you a homeowner at that point?
I was not.
Okay.
I was not. And so this girl stands up. She says she's a homeowner as a teacher. And I thought, yeah, do you know what we make? Like, there's no way I can do this. And so, but that she planted a seed. And so then I started thinking, well, why can't I do it? Yeah, she had support of her parents, but why can't I do it? Why can't I figure this out? And so I ended up, one of my girlfriends, her mom helped her buy a house. I went and I lived in a room in her house to save up money. And I saved up, I think it was, you know what a teacher makes. And I think I saved up $30,000 that year.
Wow. It was almost a 1-year salary.
Yep. I lived so minimally because I was dead set on being a homeowner. And so I made the sacrifice that was required. And when you have a dream in your heart, there's nothing you're not willing to do to achieve it. Right.
And how old were you then?
20, let's call it 25, I think, something like that.
You're still very young.
Yeah. So something like that, maybe a little bit later in my 20s. But so then I saved up enough money and I bought my first house. My first house was a foreclosure. It cost $186,000. It was in terrible condition. And it was mine. And so I could not afford to pay people to do the renovations. So what I would do is I would get on YouTube and I would learn how to do the renovations, and I renovated that house. And so when I ended up selling that house, I made $86,000 because,
wow.
because
and all of a sudden, because that was probably close to 2 years salary ish.
Yeah.
So you went from having to rent a room so you can save to get into the game to you are on your first real estate. Let's call it a flip or a sell.
Yep.
You made 2 years salary. I mean, did you feel like you were on top of the world, wealthy, smart? Like, how did that make you feel when you made that move.
it made me realize the amount of money you can make in real estate, right? So it made me realize, number one, in order to achieve your goals, you must make the sacrifices necessary to achieve them, whatever that be. And then number two, it made me realize I had lived in that home, I would say probably 2.5, 3 years. And I was able to make that amount of money. And this was before the pandemic, way before the pandemic, right?
Right. That was tax free because it was your 250,000 profit. I mean,
Right,
so it was tax free.
right,
So that's probably like 3 years salary
right.
taxes.
Yeah. So then when I later so real estate had always been a hobby. Like in my free time, I would look through homes on websites just because I was just always interested in real estate. It was a hobby. But then I decided I wanted to do it for other people as well. So not just myself, I wanted to speak into other people's lives in this way. So I got out of education, which I still very much love, and I love educators. They do such wonderful work. And I got out of education and I got into real estate. And so what's that?
What year did you get into real estate?
2018. So before the crazy pandemic, before all of that. So yeah, so I got in and there was just this really, for me, it has become a conduit to empower other people, to build their legacy, to grow their wealth, to live the life that they were designed to live.
I invited you to this podcast because I know that about you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a passion for me. And I love that it's a passion for you. And I also, I so very much appreciate that we both are trying to speak into anyone's lives to grow their life and to grow their wealth, but specifically women, because there has been such a gap.
So did you know that 90% of millionaires hold their wealth in real estate?
Yeah.
90%.
Mm-hmm.
So minus a big exit on a company or inheriting a bunch of money from mom and dad or from a family, the only way to build wealth in this country is real estate.
Yeah. Yep. That is, unless you inherit it,
right,
to build it. I was not going to inherit any money. So you have to build it. And by the way, like the amount of pride that comes from building something.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2018, you get into real estate and you've had this just absolute like boom to the top. Mm-hmm. So 6 short years. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize you'd only gotten in 2018. I got in 2020. Mm-hmm. You know, you and I've relatively gone very hard, very fast to the top. And so my question to you is, do you believe that you have done so well and been so successful because you are purpose driven in your real estate business?
I definitely think that's part of it, right? I think when you have a higher purpose, you're always working towards the purpose. And my higher purpose and my greater good, the reason I'm put on this earth is to help people. And that in whatever conduit, at one point that was education. And now it is real estate and helping people grow their wealth and helping people see opportunities that they may not have known existed. Yeah, I believe it's that. I also believe it's being trustworthy and knowing what you're doing. So being an expert in your industry, and always trying to hone your craft, but then also the ability to convey that you know what you're doing and people can trust you to help them make their biggest decisions.
It is. I mean, it's somebody's biggest decision. And so do you believe that your background in education is helpful in real estate because you're able to teach people, coach people, explain to people on, because, let's face it, our clients have different levels of knowledge, just like if you and I were to go buy something that we don't do every single day. I mean, I think about going to the skincare counter at Neiman's. The girl who works the skincare counter has a different level of knowledge than I do about what the different things do, right? And so we have a different level of knowledge, but sometimes we have investors or people that know it all, and they don't need a whole lot from us. They just need us to kind of guide it, maybe just write the contracts. And then we've got our people who I think are both of our favorites are the ones who are like, okay, I trust you. Help me build generational wealth in real estate. And then that's where, the teaching comes in.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So, and by the way, building generational wealth. So sometimes that can feel really intimidating to people. Building generational wealth doesn't mean that somebody's going out and buying a ton of investment properties. It can simply start with one property. Just simply start with one property. It's just about starting, because your first million is your hardest to make. And after that, it starts to snowball. And so starting is important. Yeah, there was a thought and I missed it, but I agree with you. I think that coming from a place of value, honesty, transparency, and then the teaching background absolutely helped, because I can quickly teach a skill or content knowledge. So the communication piece, I would say something else that has helped is crucial conversations. There are times where I'm having to
Conversation.
Oh, yeah. There are times where you're having to have a conversation with a seller about adjusting price because the market is not reacting as favorably as you wanted. There are conversations. There are sometimes, and I'm sure you have these too, where I tell people it's not the right time for them to buy or sell. It's not. Because I'm looking, and you too are looking at the financial aspect of the whole person in the entire situation. And for me and for you and for the top producers, it's never about just making money. That is not what it is. It is about helping people. And when you just help people and you put other people's interests in front of your own, naturally, you just get business because people see you care.
So the market has shifted tremendously. From what we saw in 2020, 2021, 2022. What advice do you give that person who will be listening to this, our audience? They might be watching it on something, they might be listening to it on a podcast. What advice do you give them for the 2024 real estate market?
Okay.
I did not tell you I was going to throw you that.
No, but I'm glad you did. Remember how I said in every crisis there is opportunity. And I would not call what we are in a crisis. I would not. But there is so much opportunity. And the opportunity lies here. If someone is a buyer and they can withstand the higher interest rates, and by the way, we are not in crazy high interest rates. Yes, we're hovering between 6.5% and 7% right now. We are not in crazy times. The 80s were crazy times. So right now where we are is higher than where we have been. So it feels uncomfortable. But if someone is able to withstand the higher interest rates and get a home that they love, they are able to purchase it at a lower price today than they could have 2 years ago, and they likely can in the future. And so it's a great time to buy if someone is able to withstand the interest rates, and for a short period of time, because they will refinance when they go down. For people who are selling properties, it's a great time to sell if they have equity in their home. And we gained more appreciation than we lost. So we're still above the trend line. And so it's a great time for people to sell if they are realistic with their pricing and they understand the strategy that an agent who is reputable is setting for them. So if they're willing to make sure that they are strategic on price and on marketing and strategy, then they're going to be just fine.
What advice would you give someone who's listening to this? Let's say they're a seller and they're at odds with their agent in the fact on value. They're really strong on, they think this is the price, and the agent, if it's a good agent, like you said, is going to present the true market to them. What's your advice? What would you tell a seller? What would you tell an agent? Like when they're at odds, what do you do when you can't come together? With a seller on price.
Here's what I would say is I'll say what I would say to them. But first I would say, I have an attorney who I think is an excellent attorney. And I hired that attorney because I think he's excellent at his job. And there are times where he tells me, hey, that's not the way you should think about it. Think about it this way. And I listen because I know he is a content expert and I am not. I do not have my law degree. Right. And so when it comes to real estate and someone is hiring an agent, number one, I would say interview agents. People, I'm like the one agent who's out there like, no, interview. Here's some great questions. Ask away. Because I feel like it is supposed to be a relationship that is built around trust. And you have to trust the person that you're working with because they may give you advice you don't want to hear. And you should take their advice because they are the expert. They are the industry expert. They are in homes all day. They are looking online all day. They are talking to buyers and sellers all day. They understand more about the market than someone who is not in it all day, every day. And so if you're hiring someone, interview to make sure you're hiring the right person, and then lean in and trust in that relationship, because they are the expert that you hired to do a job, just like I hire my attorney to do a job.
No, that's great advice. Absolute great advice. So, what's your advice here? um, let's just say that a seller needs to sell, but they're not getting the price that they're looking to get. You know, I've had sellers say to me recently, well, should I hold on to the house and rent it out?
Mm-hmm.
Or should I take the lower price based on, you know, the recommendations? What, like, do you have a feel for that? Like, how do you feel? And we're in the Central Texas market. So what's your feeling about that? Holding, renting, and praying it goes up, or, you know, coming to a conclusion on what the true value of this asset is and then making a business decision?
Yeah, my next thing would be a lot of questions. So what is their strategy? What does their portfolio already look like? What is their goal? What is their goal with that property? What is
Landlord? I mean, really? Yeah.
What'd you say?
I said, one thing I asked him is like, you know, do you really want to be a landlord?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends, right? There are people who would prefer, and by the way, we're going to be in this market for a minute. This is what it is. So if somebody is saying, I'm not getting the price that I want today in this market, I also am telling them, how long can you hold on to get that price? Because it may take 3 to 5 years or longer, right? Yeah. And so so one question is, are you willing to hold this property for 3 to 5 years in order for the price for sales to bounce back? Are you willing to do that? If they are, then possibly hold it. Are you comfortable being a landlord? Fine, hold it. But the other things are to be realistic. Have you looked at what you're going to get in rent? Have you looked at what it might change in property taxes if you no longer have a homestead on that property? Have you looked at property management fees? Do you have some money aside for if the HVAC goes out, if we get hit with a hailstorm, for the deductible for the roof? You know, so there are some very logistical things that I walk through with them to determine what the right financial goal and path is for them.
Such good information. Like, I should have been writing all this down. It's excellent. Okay, so, you know, as we kind of wrap this up, you know, the one question that I'm going to ask all of my experts is, what do you think can be done? What can women do to bridge the $1 million wealth gap? Now, when I talk about that, Tanya, I talk about the $1 million wealth gap. If you look at the stats, a 50-year-old woman, a 50-year-old man, same education, same earnings, same everything, but he is worth $1 million more than she is at the age of 50. So we call that the wealth gap, and it's real. It's in the U.S. It's documented, and it's $1 million. What advice would you give to our listeners and our viewers about how to bridge the $1 million wealth gap?
So where I would start is, let's figure out why it began. Let's figure out why we're here. Why is there a gap in the first place? Okay. And so here's my thinking around that. Is number one, it's the psychology. You have to look at the psychology of it. So when we are little boys and girls, conversations about money happen more frequently. And this is like a traditional thing. I'm not saying that this is where we are right now. I think we are moving in the right direction. But traditionally speaking, more conversations around money and investments happen with boys than they do the females. And so men grow up with this idea of, they have the capacity, they have the knowledge, they have the resources in order to grow their wealth. Whereas women, it was in my 30s before I began to say, wait a minute, there's something here. Like, so, and it was because I took an interest in it that I continued to learn and grow about that. Nobody had a conversation about money with me or investments. Nothing. It was not taught in college, or at least I didn't take that class. It was not taught. The only class around finances that I ever took was one in accounting, how to write a check and balance my checkbook, which is a moot point now. But, you know, and
what's that?
I actually do use checks. I'm so old school. But So I think that number one, we have to remember that we got here because men have been in positions to have more conversations around money than women have, and that has to change. So I do think the tides are turning. There's a statistic I wrote down recently, and it's 42% of men are in college, as opposed to women. Women are now in a higher percentage. There's a higher ratio of women in college than men now, which is something new. The tide has definitely turned in that. But financially speaking, women who are working full time are paid 83.7% of what men are made, or what men are making. So
So
there's
right there, there's a 17% wealth gap.
yeah, so there's still a gap in what women are paid
Wage
versus men.
disparity.
Yeah, yeah. And I also there's I think it was Simon Sinek's book. I think, don't quote me on that, but I remember hearing women are promoted on proven results in the workforce.
Okay.
Men are promoted on potential.
Ooh, you've just dropped so many nuggets for me to go
Yeah.
back and think about today, like promoted. And I see it because
Yeah.
I've always worked in male dominated industries.
Yep. Yeah. So that's something to think about. And if you look at it, I mean, so I was in education, right? What percentage of women are in education? It is
Nine,
it's
100.
predominantly female.
Yeah.
But look at the highest levels of leadership in education.
Yeah.
Men are
Principal.
usually holding those positions in
Yeah.
the highest levels of leadership.
Yeah.
In real estate, women make up 61% of real estate. But if you look at the highest levels of leadership, oftentimes it is men driven.
I'm going to tell you, with my company and your company, the chairman of the boards, or the chairmans of the board, I guess I should say, are men.
Yep.
Mhm.
And by the way, this is no man bashing, because I think the men that I know in those positions are doing phenomenal jobs. They're extremely skilled and knowledgeable.
But it's interesting. I would like to know, and I'm going to go on a rabbit trail here just a little bit,
Mhm.
of all the real estate companies out there, the big ones like ours, are there any women chairmen, CEOs?
Mhm. I know that there are in Keller Williams, there are women that are pretty high up there in the top. There are one of the largest teams in the entire.
Us too. But what I mean is, there is a Glenn Sanford and a Gary Keller.
Yep.
At that level,
Yep.
at any other company, I just wonder. When I read Inman and things like that, I read it every week. It's always the guy. So now you're going to make me go have to research this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is fascinating. And then another question to ask is, how far down do I need to go before I hit the highest woman?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
where is the highest ranking female? What position does she hold?
Right.
It's just interesting.
And a lot of times it's a CMO, chief marketing officer, it's a CFO, a financial officer. But when you look at heads of sales and strategy, typically, and I'm going through my head because I know a lot of, I do a lot of research on companies. It's men. And sales is where the money's made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I truly believe that everything should just be fair. I think women should have the same opportunities for a position that a man has, and vice versa. I don't feel like any gender should ever have a.
So I'm going to speak to that, okay?
Mhm.
I wrote a book back in 2016 called Car Buying Her Way, and we did a lot of research. I hired a research team, and I was in the auto industry, and I was the only woman that sat on the National Dealer Council for all of Chrysler, Fiat, Maserati, Ferrari, Alfa, all of it, Dodge. And there's 19 of us, me and 18 men, and we were the senators for 2,400 retailers. And the biggest reason that we didn't have more female dealers, the biggest reason we didn't have more females in leadership until Mary Barra came along with General Motors, is because there's a certain time of life, like you're in that time, Tanya, you've got a young daughter,
Mhm.
that women can't go do what needs to be done sometimes to hold that position, right? And so a lot of times she ends up staying home, and he gets to go rise to the top. And good, bad, or ugly, it's just the way it is. I mean, our children as women
Yeah.
are our number one concern.
Yeah.
So real estate does afford you. It afforded me. I was in the mortgage business when my kids were young, but it afforded me a lot of flexibility to be able to be a good mom, to be able to be successful, to be able to write my own schedule. And when you're trying to climb a corporate ladder, you don't get to do that. Your time is not your own.
Yeah. Oh man, they're like, this is a book on its own.
It is.
It is, because when you were, so I think there's a couple things here. So number one, it can be difficult to be an ambitious woman sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, you walk a really fine line with how direct or how ambitious you can be, right? But then also really, really balancing home life, rearing children with also your career. And the dynamics here have changed too. You're starting to see men who are stay-at-home dads,
Yeah.
and the women are the breadwinner. You're starting to see that more, and I think that that's fantastic that those conversations exist, and people are making decisions that are right for their family. You're starting to see more dynamics of where the husband and the wife are both in the industry. They're both out working in the workforce. And because they are both making very good money, they now are creating positions, whether it's a nanny, whether it's a housekeeper, whatever it is, they're creating jobs. Yes, a house manager. That's like a big thing on the upswing. And so I think that the dynamics are definitely changing. One thing that I always practice, and I encourage other women to do, is there is something so powerful about my daughter seeing me achieve my goals.
Yeah.
So powerful. There's there was one time where she saw another woman's sign, a real estate sign, and she saw it. And I don't put my face on my signs, but this woman did, and she said, "Mommy, I think you should get that sign. And she was like so proud of me, and she was like, "You should have a bigger sign than that." So like seeing I think our daughters seeing us step into the industry and have positions that are and live big lives and have messages that are bigger than ourselves to send about financial freedom and growing other people and serving other people. I think that is so impactful for our youth, and who they will become. And so it is more challenging, because my heart is my daughter. That is my heart. And also I recognize that to be the best mom for her, I need to have my passion and be able to live out this reason that God put me here on earth. And also she gets to watch me do it. And but it definitely is a balance, like making sure that I'm there for her games, making sure that I can be there, and letting it takes a village.
Well, and I'll tell you, one of my favorite sayings is for women is that you have to see it to be it. And that was something that it was a battle cry for me when I was in the automotive industry. I'm like, if women can't see people in my position, then they don't think things are possible. And there was a gal that I hired one time, and she didn't have any experience in sales, but I really liked her. And I said, so like, why should I hire you? Tell me about yourself. Why do you think you can cut it in this male dominated industry? She goes, because I want your job someday. And that was the day that I realized that my job was important. It wasn't important because I was a dealer selling cars. It was important because I was showing women what was possible.
Heck yes.
Yeah.
Heck yes.
So for your daughter, she's going to see it. So now she knows that she knows that she knows that she can be it.
For my daughter and for other women, there have been so many times where a woman has said, I watch you. I watch you on Instagram. I watch you on Facebook. I'm watching you. I'm cheering you on.
Yep.
And it means, because if you can do it, I feel like I can do it. And there have been times where I have thought, I mean, don't get me wrong, business is hard. It's hard. It's hard to run. It's hard to have your own business. It's hard to manage people. It's hard.
The industry's hard. The market's hard. Like, if people knew how hard you and I really work, they'd be like, whoa.
Right. I agree. And it's so worth it because it's not about you and me. It's not. It's about the people that we serve and the women we give permission to go and be ambitious. We
Yes.
give them permission.
Yes.
Um, because whether or not we know it, people are watching. I'm watching. I'm watching some of my greatest mentors achieve, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, if they can do it, I can do it too. If they can push harder, I can push harder. If they can make sacrifices, I can make sacrifices. So, yeah, I think that there is something so cool about being the hero of your own story.
Yeah, and I think that's really a great place to kind of wrap things up today is, is that we want to encourage you, which is why, again, I'm bringing on only top tier guests, people that I know them personally. I know the stories. I've watched them. Highly successful women. I only have women guests, but highly successful women because everyone's got a different journey, right? And everyone's had a different journey. But at the end of the day, all roads have come together for success. Some journeys are easier than others. Some journeys, are longer than others, but it doesn't matter. Like, right. So the one thing that I tell everybody is like, you can't quit. The minute you quit, it's over. Right.
Right.
I mean, my good friend Sharon Lecter, she'll be on the podcast, but she co-authored the book Rich Dad Poor Dad with Robert Kiyosaki. But she wrote a book called 3 Feet from Gold. I don't know if you ever read it or not, but it's with the Napoleon Hill Foundation, and it's absolutely phenomenal. And what it's really the premise around it is that the majority of people stop 3 feet from where the gold is. You push, you push, you push, and then you go, oh, I'm done.
Yep.
And you were that close if you wouldn't have quit.
Yep. And it's harder to quit when you know that you have people who are counting on you. It is harder to quit.
Like your
And so
dog?
this would be like if I were to leave a final message to any and men and women alike, but if I were to leave a message, because by the way, I feel like the solution for women is with men. Men have to help us.
$1,000,000%.
Yeah.
Us coming together
Yeah.
is where we will do great things.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If I had to leave a woman or anyone with a message, it is let this be the seed. Let this be the seed that's planted for you to think, you know what? I have always had a dream about buying my first home or buying an investment property or growing my wealth or changing the generational changing my trajectory for my generations past me, for my future family. There will be a time and day where my daughter's kids look back and they say, where did it change? Where did it change? And I want them to point back to me in our lineage. I want them to say, that's where it changed.
I
And
love it.
so there, that is within everyone's reach. And the person who feels like it isn't, it sure is. You just aren't having the conversation with the right person.
So good. Okay, so Tanya, how do people follow you? How do people reach out? How do people find you?
Yeah, sure. So you can find us. Our web address is tkerrealestate.com. We are the T Kerr Property Group in Georgetown. And my direct number is 512-748-5343. So feel free to reach out online or over the phone and just let us know how we can be of support.
Let me just put that website up here. All right. So people want to reach out to you. That's where they can find you.
That is where they can find us.
Okay, good. All right. Well, Tanya, thank you so much. You're amazing. I appreciate all of your insights. And I know that somebody, what you said today, you dropped so many nuggets that, it'll change someone's life for sure.
I hope it does.
Thank you, Tanya.
Hey, thank you, Lisa.